On November 7, New York City voters will get the chance to vote in the general election for mayor, public advocate, controller, city council, borough president, and Manhattan and Brooklyn district attorney. But, with Democrats dominating city politics, most of these races were effectively decided in the September primary. New Yorkers statewide, however, have the chance to vote on 3 ballot initiatives on the back of the ballot. The first initiative, Proposal 1, could profoundly reshape politics in New York State. Proposal 1 asks voters whether the state should hold a constitutional convention, allowing the voters to bypass the state legislature and codify into laws things that the notoriously corrupt legislature might not pass. The measure is put to the ballot every 20 years. If it fails to pass, it won't come up again until 2037. In 1997, voters rejected holding a convention, or a con by a margin of 63-37. The last time a con was held was in 1967, but voters ultimately rejected the proposed amendments. The last con to yield enacted amendments took place in 1938, in the midst of the New Deal era. The structure by which a con would be held is somewhat complicated. If a majority of voters cast a yes vote in November 2018, voters will get to select delegates to the convention, subdivided by state Senate districts. Those delegates will meet in April 2019 to propose amendments, which will ultimately be put before the voters in November 2019. The proposed amendments could either be placed on the ballot individually or as a package. If either individual amendments or the amendment package win a majority of votes, the Constitution will be amended. Polls have fluctuated wildly on the con question. A Quinnipiac poll in July showed New Yorkers heavily supporting the yes side, with 55% in favor and 30% opposed. But the equation has flipped in the time since that poll. A Siena poll released on November 1 showed that, just before the vote, 57% of voters are intending to vote no, with just 25% of voters intending to vote yes. How did the script flip so dramatically? Part of it may be that many voters are simply unfamiliar with the vote. Indeed, when asked how much they knew about the con, 38% of voters said they either knew nothing or knew not very much in the Siena poll. As of October 17, supporters have been outspent by opponents by about a 5-to-1 margin. Supporters of a convention largely consist of good government groups and certain advocacy groups, such as women's rights organizations. Good government groups believe that a con is the only chance for a long time to bypass the state legislature and enact reforms to the state's elections and governing processes. New York has been ranked as the #1 most corrupt state in the country, bypassing even cesspools such as Illinois, New Jersey, Texas, Florida, and North Carolina. New York's topping the list actually came before those leaders of both state legislative bodies, Assembly Speaker Sheldon Silver and Senate Majority Leader Dean Skelos, were convicted of public corruption in 2016. Both Silver and Skelos have since had their convictions overturned as a result of new precedent set by a Supreme Court case involving former Virginia Governor Bob McDonnell. Both will be tried again. Corruption is not just a feature of New York State politics, it is woven into the fabric of the state's governance. Between 2006 and 2015, 28 public officials, most of them legislators, were convicted of public corruption. Governor Andrew Cuomo disbanded a commission on public corruption when it set its sights on Cuomo's own corruption and has been accused of bid rigging in a major economic development project in Buffalo. Mayor Bill de Blasio narrowly escaped an indictment in March over fundraising practices related to his attempt to win the state Senate for Democrats in 2014. Manhattan DA Cy Vance said that despite not going forward with prosecution, de Blasio's actions were contrary to the intent and spirit of the laws. And now, Vance himself is facing scrutiny for accepting donations from the lawyers of people he was investigating, namely Ivanka Trump, Donald Trump Jr., and Harvey Weinstein. The state budget is drawn up by the governor and the legislative chamber leaders behind closed doors, away from the view of cameras, rather than out in the open and in view of the citizenry. The LLC loophole, created by the State Board of Elections, allows limited liability companies to be subject to individual donation limits rather than corporate limits. This has allowed wealthy individuals and corporations to create multiple LLCs with no oversight and inject unlimited amounts of money into elections. Many a starry-eyed legislator has trekked up to Albany hoping to end the loophole, only to be spat right back out by the festering culture. Lawmakers are also allowed to have an outside income, something the New York City Council recently banned. This creates an inherent conflict of interest for legislators. New York State's elections are also abysmal. New York State's voter turnout in the 2016 presidential election was 51.1%, 43rd out of the 50 states. In the September New York City primary, turnout was an appalling 14%. And in 2016's congressional primary, turnout was a whopping 8%. Good government groups charge that this is because of New York's repressive voting laws, which forbid early voting, same-day or automatic voter registration, and feature closed-party primaries that disenfranchise independents. New York also has some of the strictest registration deadlines in the country, with a deadline of around 6 months before primary day to switch your party registration. Since they do not expect the legislature to pass laws that would hamper corruption, good government groups hope to use the convention to bypass the state legislature and enact the necessary reforms to reduce malfeasance in Albany. Some other advocacy groups are also supporting a con. In particular, reproductive rights groups such as the League of Women Voters believe that a convention could enshrine protections for abortion, as laid out by Roe v. Wade, into the Constitution amid a federal environment where reproductive rights could be curtailed at any moment by a Republican Congress.